the council meeting for the town of Grand Bay-Westfield on Tuesday, February 7th, 2023 to order at 7 o'clock p.m. We respectfully acknowledge that Grand Bay-Westfield exists on the traditional Wolastoqey land. The lands of Wabanaki people are recognized in a series of peace and friendship treaties to establish an ongoing relationship of peace, friendship, and mutual respect between equal nations. The river that runs by our town is known as Wolastoq, along which live Wolastoqey, the people of the beautiful and bountiful river. We, the staff and elected representatives, pay respect to the elders, past and present, and descendants of these lands. Record of attendance. Let the record reflect that we have all of our councillors, with the exception of Councillor Day and Deputy Mayor Toole, who have sent their regrets. Agenda approval. The motion is that the Council of the Town of Grand Bay-Westfield approve the agenda of February 7th, 2023 as presented. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Councillor Balcom. Do I have a second? Thank you, Councillor Bellmans. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 6, disclosure of conflict of interest. Is there any? There being none, we'll move on to item 7, public hearings, presentations, delegations, petitions. 7A is presentation of approved 2023 budget and tax rates. And I will turn the meeting over to our CAO and our CAO.
It's your turn.
Oh, it's my turn. Okay. Thanks, John. So I guess it's my turn. So we're doing the strategic plan review first. So our strategic plan will serve as the town's highest level plan, and we use it to set priorities, strengthen our operations, align efforts, and focus on what matters most to our residents, and help us build a community for everyone. An open community, not a gated community. Most important, our plan is a clear marker of a commitment to our collective priorities. It will be used to continually drive us towards effective and efficient service delivery, accountability, and ongoing improvement. This starts with a vision, and ours is a welcoming place for all to live, grow, and thrive. The North Star concepts in our plan are inspiring and are growth-oriented. The strategic priorities are smart growth, organizational capacity, infrastructure and climate adaptation, and community vitality. Our mission is simple, it's meaningful, and it's action-oriented, facilitating growth, wellness, and prosperity through effective and forward-thinking leadership. And that leadership isn't just the leadership here around the table, it's the leadership in the community, in our businesses, in our community groups, in our churches, and in our residents as a whole. So council has talked a lot about the values that we want to bring to our governance, and together we've discussed the importance of justice, teamwork, understanding, community, courage, inclusion, trust, and openness. These are all very important. But more recently, based on recent events and current geopolitical realities, local governance reform, inflation, and things of that, and of course COVID being the big one over the last few years, Council chose resiliency as a new core value. A strong, sustainable, and growing community must be resilient. Our strategic plan is the roadmap that will get us from where we are today to where we want to be in the days and the years ahead. Now, we're just not going to say, okay, we're moving ahead, this is how we're doing, it looks like we're doing good, we're doing well. We've actually established metrics to quantify the resilience of the organization. From an economic perspective, over the next 10 years, our stretch goal is to increase new assessment by $200 million. We'll want more community amenities, more commercial amenities, and more housing. From a community perspective, over the next 10 years, we want to grow the population by 1,000 residents. We want to increase our opportunities for fulfillment. We want to increase participation. We want to, and that's, we're talking in community events, we're talking civically, and with our businesses as a whole. From a governance perspective, we want to grow our reserves up to $2 million. and we want to increase our public engagement in what we do here as a council and as a town organization. From the environmental perspective, we want to focus on remediating brownfield lands, continue to reduce our greenhouse gas, and we want to look at curbside collection of solid waste and recycling and increase transit access. Implementation of this plan will allow Grand Bay-Westfield to seize the opportunities before us and to build on the successes that we have now and that we will have in the future. And the budget is the financial manifestation of our plan. It's how we finance it and we make the work happen. Our common desire to see the abundance of our town grow and mature and see our neighboring communities flourish will guide us into the future. We all have a vision of what our town will be like in 10 years. We see a thriving community with a revitalized commercial core, varied and diverse housing options, intermunicipal transportation links, and a strong culture of supporting local and supporting each other. We see a vibrant town, all of us, patronizing community businesses. A business hub along Colonel Nace, linking our businesses together as they support each other into success. Multi-use housing, so there is a home for all demographics who want to enjoy the incredible quality of life we have here in Grand Bay-Westfield. Active transportation routes, bringing our children to school, bringing people together from one end of our town to the other and into the neighboring communities as well. A thriving cultural, recreational, and leisure culture, engaging our existing residents and drawing new ones in, even if just for the day. We are well on our way. So when we look at 2023 and beyond, the heart of Grand Bay-Westfield is our people. Our work is about today, but it's also about tomorrow. It's about this council, it's about the next council, and it's about the council after that. We are a forward-thinking council because we know that the future is where growth will continue. We are committed to collaboratively building a community for everyone by making our vision a reality for the benefit of all. Thanks. Okay, and so now I will turn it over to our CEO, John Ensley.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. And it's a pleasure to be back here again for 2023, this time doing the budget that includes what is now Ward 2, the former Westfield West LSD. And just remind Council that, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions. Better off address them here and now. We have greatly reduced this length from when we did it last November, but there still may be questions, and want to do our best to make sure that if you have questions, residents may have questions, answer them here while we can, and then we'll get started. So Council's outlined some 10-year outcomes for us through their strategic plan, and they've identified some priorities. And this one used to be about population growth for sustainable finances. We've shortened it. Smart growth is a lot more pleasant on the ear and eyes than population growth for sustainable finances. But the importance is still the same. And I just want to let Council know, as well as our residents, that back in the first meeting in January, I presented mandate letters to Council for each of our employees, not each of our employees, but each member of the leadership team. And they have a responsibility for these different parts of this work plan throughout the year to accomplish Council's goals for the strat plan. But I'll just go through them, and I also like to let everybody know that some of these things we've already been working on. And there's a lot of work that goes on in the background. It's almost like a duck. There's a lot of paddling that goes on under the surface. But first off, advocating to the province to enhance our educational facilities and to partner with them for multi-purpose uses. This is about being able to access the schools afterwards. It's about good facilities that our children really need to go to, that to have opportunities that are taken for granted in other municipalities. We want to attract and retain families from across Canada and around the world. I'm pleased to say, Council, that we have someone like that working for us now. Partner with relevant agencies to encourage international immigrants to relocate to Grand Bay-Westfield. The mayor spoke at the Chinese New Year. We do meet with the Y and other agencies to make ourselves known, but there are some barriers to attracting people to live here. We want to attract developers to build a diversity of housing options. I'm pleased to say that yesterday, members of council and myself met with the group that we'd be able to do that with, but of course there's nothing to report as of yet. And then work towards a more diverse tax base. I'm pleased to say I had a meeting today about economic development, but there's still a lot of work to go on here. We're going to get into details about why number 5 here is so important. The second growth is organizational capacity. And we can't do anything to accomplish council's goals without having the horsepower, as it were, to be able to do that and to identify what the smart work is. It's one thing to work hard, it's another thing to work hard and smart. That's what we're trying to do. So again, this is something we've been working on for the past year in your worship and council. I do think we have made great strides in ensuring that council's processes and decisions are communicated clearly and timely to residents. I just can't say how much the communications managers made a difference to our organization. Local government reform was last year, but as everybody knows by our bylaw schedule, it's a big thing this year as well. It's going to be ongoing. I've developed an issue management plan for Westfield West. We do have concerns. One person's assets, such as the province, may someday become our liabilities. We want to ensure that we're in a place that we can manage them. As I alluded to earlier, we have to renew bylaws and policies, and of course the municipal plan and zoning bylaw. And to our new neighbors in Ward 2, along Britton Road, Campbell Road, we actually started work and spending money last year to renew the municipal plan and zoning bylaw, because all the behind the scenes work was done so that we could have this in place in May and June. And then, of course, the ongoing issue about reports for relevant and timely information to inform decision making. Our CFO, who started with us last May, seems longer in a good way, not in a bad way. We already have a multi-year plan for utilities, and for council's next budget deliberations for 24, we'll have another multi-year forecast to see where the projection would take us on some of the services or priorities that council may have for us. And of course, infrastructure and climate adaptation in some respects. The town's core service is the infrastructure that it has. I'm pleased to say that we have a fairly robust asset management plan, and we are placing emphasis on life cycle planning for this building and other assets that we have, be it a playground or whatever, big, small, and in between. We're going to be updating and moving to this model. Ensure all retrofits, renovations, and new construction employ maximum energy efficiency as fiscally viable to achieve net zero green. So this is what we'll be doing as we move forward. We don't really have anything in the works right now. 2025, I think, we're looking at a new works garage that's been punted around for over 20 years already. And then, of course, determine a carbon neutral master plan in conjunction with a climate change action plan. This will be done in probably 25. Part of that will be about fleet replacement. And then the other thing too, speaking about the climate change action plan, we'll be looking at Ward 2 to develop a climate change action plan over there as well. We hope to have that done about the same time that the municipal plan is. That's assuming we can get the money and the financing for it. And then, of course, everybody's favorite, the one with the highest profile, is community vitality. This is critically important for our community. And, you know, it's only 2 bullets, but it really disguises the amount of work that goes into implementing the comprehensive Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We could probably go on for slides about the work that has to be done and has been done. And, but that's what's driving a lot of things that members see. We now have a calendar of events and activities. We have our recreation program coordinator who's met with almost all groups, if not all groups, within the community. And he's become it's been just a privilege to have him as part of the team for the amount of skills that he has to make everybody's job here easier and better. I just want to say, Your Worship, we've made 3 significant hires within a year: the communications manager, our CFO, and a recreation program coordinator. And they've just been tremendous to have on team. I feel very grateful that we're able to bring them on board, and lucky. And then become a center of wellness with a diversity of health professionals. And that was part of the meeting yesterday that we had in an indirect sense. So what does our town look like? You know, in November, if you tuned in to see the presentation then, you saw a neat little slide going back to 2001, and how we grew and how we plateaued. You saw another slide about how our over 65 group was actually growing larger, but we don't have that anymore. So this is year 0 for Grand Bay-Westfield. Our population is 5,866. And about 85% of our population lives in Ward 1 with a population of 4,967, and then just shy of 900 people in Ward 2. So that's our population going forward. And like every organization, we have our pressure points. And local governance reform is still going to be an ongoing issue, Council. So for those living in Ward 2 who prepared your budget, the local service manager, Terry Keating, who everybody worked with in the past, for example, with the Westfield and District Recreation Association budget, he supplied us all the numbers, and our CFO is going to go and show you the template that we had to work, that the province gave us to distinguish between what was the responsibility of Ward 1, what was the responsibility of Ward 2, and then what's the responsibility of the whole town. And our CFO will do a brief overview of that. And but if you live in Ward 2 and you have questions about the budget, feel free to call us, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. And like I said, the budget was passed or approved by the province around December 5th. This is the first week of December. We're very fortunate. We're one of the first communities to have our budget approved. The Fundy Regional Service Commission budget was determined, and that's resulted in multiple increases, and multiple because it's just not money that's going up to them. It's reasonable to expect that council workload will go up. You know, terms of reference for the various subcommittees of the commission are coming across my desk, and they've expanded the scope, so it's not just the mayor working full-time on some of these things, but we'll volunteer some councillors, if I can use that word, for some of the committees as well. And then, of course, I'm meeting about twice a month right now on some of these things. As an example, I'm going to Quispam for CAO meetings regarding Fundy Regional Service Commission Thursday morning. So I'll be out for the better part of that morning, well, the whole morning, frankly. And then also what we are doing, and I want to give my compliments to the new councillor from Ward 2. She's provided a lot of valuable insight, and I was able to meet with the Deputy Minister of Local Governance Reform, members of the environment part of environment and local government, people from DTI, to go over about some of the assets that are over there, such as the water and wastewater system in Salmon Rock, and also understand how to work with DTI over there and advocate for our residents. So I've had the bulk of those meetings in January, Your Worship, and so this work has already been ongoing. Before I turn it over to our CFO, any questions about what I quickly ran through? Great. I am glad that you saved them all for our CFO. So it's James's turn, and he'll take it over from here.
Thank you, John. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. So as part of the local governance reform, there were changes made to the equalisation and community funding grants that we receive from the province each year. This is a vital piece of funding that we receive to offer the services that we offer to our residents. The formula was changed for 2023. It was drastically improved. The previous formula was very complicated. It was impossible to replicate. I believe that the formulas took up 4 pages if printed, and it's been simplified dramatically. Unfortunately for the town, that did result in a decrease in funding for 2023 of $13,000. And while that may seem like a small number, if you remember back to the 2022 budget, the funding was reduced by $350,000. So in the space of 2 years, the grant funding from the provincial government has been reduced by almost $365,000. To put that in a tax rate perspective, it's about 7 cents on the tax rate for residents. So that created a big hole in the budget for 2022, and then we've seen another decrease for 2023. Good news though, the province did provide funding directly to the Regional Service Commissions. So the Fundy Regional Service Commission did receive $36,000 on our behalf directly. They went directly to the Service Commission from Fredericton to help pay for some of the increased costs related to the services they provide to the town. So as mentioned, the formula is cleaner, it's more predictable, it's going to allow us to look into the future and help understand the funding that we will receive in the future. We did make an attempt to replicate the formula and calculate our grant. We weren't quite able to, but we believe now we have some more information, and when time permits, we're going to replicate that calculation and then reach out to folks in Fredericton if we need additional help, so we can understand that formula. So when we come to do the budget in future years, we can have a good idea the amount of funding that we will receive. Unfortunately, that's a number we received very late in the game in putting the budget together. So a lot of work's been done in the budget process. If you find out that the funding has been reduced, it can really, it can be quite distressing, as I know this council went through a couple of years ago. The town's assessment base did increase $48 million in 2023. This is good news. However, less than 8 million was due to new development. The rest of it, approximately 40 million, was due to the property market. As we all know, the last couple of years it's been a red hot property market. So that was an adjustment in the assessment values to reflect the property prices. If we could frame the town's financial position in one word, it would be fragile. Any decrease in revenues, any increases in costs can have a direct impact on the level of service that the town can provide for residents. It really is that close. You know, the $13,000 number may seem small in a $7 million budget, but that really does have an impact on how much money goes to community vitality, how often a road pothole gets filled. It really does have an impact. So we'll just talk a little bit more about the property assessment makeup. So now we have Ward 2 and Ward 1. So there's a split there. About 89% of the property assessments are in Ward 1, 11% are in Ward 2, with about 2% non-residential and 98% residential. So if we just delve a little bit more into that split between residential and non-residential, that's what it looks like on a graph. So big blue circle with a little yellow sliver. That's the makeup of our town. It's residential houses. People that own a family home, or an apartment, or a holiday house. It's residential houses. Non-residential, commercial businesses. So with a very small percentage of non-residential, any increase to taxes is felt by the homeowner, not commercial businesses. Commercial businesses, or non-residential, pay a 1.7 times the tax rate that residential owners pay. So when there's an increase in the tax rate, more of that burden falls on non-residential and a little bit less falls on residential. But with such a small percentage of non-residential, the residential homeowners are not shielded by that. Other communities around us, Rossay, they have about 5% non-residential, because Pamsis is about 4%. The higher that percentage, the more diverse the assessment base, the more broadly any tax changes can be spread across the community. So that's something that council should be aware of. Over time, hopefully, we can grow that non-residential base and make it more broad, diversify the assessment base of the town. So another key factor that you'll see play into the 2023 budget was inflation. As we know, 2022 was a year of inflation. As the world came out of 2 years of being in a pandemic, prices went through the roof. Fuel prices, food prices, pretty much everything increased. Inflation had historically, for the last 20 years, been between 0 and 3%. It topped out just around 7% last year, and we've seen that come down a little bit, but that really played havoc with the 2022 budget. I think we doubled our fuel spend. We blew through our fuel spend by July 2022 for the year. So that had to be factored into 2023, because we didn't want to be in a position where we'd spent our budget 7 months into the year. So this theme will come up again tonight as we go through the budget, but it was a real thing. Debt costs. So the town does have debt. We're permitted to borrow funds through the province. There's a municipal capital borrowing board that we can apply to if we want to buy a capital asset. And we're provided funding that way. So the blue line there represents our current debt costs. So that would include principal repayments and interest payments. So the blue line is where we are right now. You'll see it dip off 2026, 2027. There's a couple of loans we have on Colonel Nays Boulevard that will be paid off by then. The yellow line represents projected borrowing. So there's some projected borrowing in the future. We are in the process of borrowing $600,000 towards the 2023 capital plan. That was for a municipal tractor and a loader, and that will increase the amount that we have to pay for debt in the future. There's also factored in there the works garage, which we're aiming for 2025. That will be a significant item we need to borrow for. And I'm going to hand back over to John to take you through department priorities.
Thank you, James. Any questions for James before we get on to department priorities?
No, I just want to thank him for such a clear presentation. It makes
We're not done yet.
I know, but it's very clear. It's plain language, and it makes it really understandable. So thank you.
So priorities for 2023, how are we going to get things done? So these are the things that we're focusing on. Snow and ice control this year, it's an elephant for us taking this on. Implementation of local governance reform, which I alluded to earlier. The ongoing implementation of Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We're looking at an outdoor recreation facility with multiple partners. We talked about this in November. We just can't say anything public yet, except the work is ongoing. Economic development. We were hoping to do more work on this last year, but local governance reform kind of ate up our time to do that. And then we're also working with multiple partners to increase the number of services provided in Grand Bay-Westfield for the residents of Grand Bay-Westfield in our area. We also have the Fundy Regional Service Commission, and so there's a number of partners there through that. So when you look at the Arts Center, the Aquatic Games Center, Harbor Station, TD Station, St. John Trade and Convention Center, and the Imperial, they're all through the Regional Facilities Commission, which isn't anymore, but each of these entities are run by a commission. And then, of course, Envision St. John, which my first day on the job was one of the first meetings. Well, it was the first meeting to get that agency stood up. And that's still an ongoing concern, and hopefully hitting its stride very soon. And do appreciate the work that they have been doing. The finance department, James and Hannah, our new assistant treasurer, have been hard at work, and just want to say to council, very pleased with what they're doing over there. We're using a lot more technology. I don't think we're eliminating forests anymore. And we're still currently working on some forests, but not to the degree that we were. Workflows have been changed. My first days here changed the workflows. James has continued to do that to find efficiencies. We have found tremendous response to e-transfers this year. Last year, I know council wanted us to make it easier for people to pay by having payments. That did as well as a rock in a stream or a river. And however, this has made a huge difference. If I recall correctly, over half our payments are coming through this way now.
Yeah.
Which is a significant uptake, and which is just fantastic. And we're going to EFTs for payments to suppliers, and even for staff for salaries and wages. James and Hannah have been learning quite a bit about our accounting software system and are maximizing that. And we're currently doing, they're just implementing purchase orders. Yeah, purchase orders on that. So they had training earlier this week. Earlier this week or last week?
Last week and this week.
Yeah, on doing this. So we'll be going to paperless POs here soon. We are moving forward. And then, as I alluded to earlier, multi-year forecasting for budget. This will make a significant difference for us when we go into our budget deliberations. And just for people at home who may be watching, we start our budget internally in July. Council really kicks things off in a hurry on the last Wednesday of August, and James will be alluding and talking about this later. Communications, as I said, we have a communications manager now. I don't know how we did without him before this. He'll continue to implement the communications plan. If people have been visiting our website, they'll notice that it's been evolving. And we're trying to move toward be more user-friendly. And just in case council's getting too comfortable, we do anticipate 2 to 3 years doing another overhaul. Not quite the one that we did when I first arrived, but it will need some substantial investment. We're trying to increase and promote community engagement. This is why we're doing this tonight as an example. We'll be out at the Nerepus Baptist Church, I don't recall the name offhand, for a municipal plan. So we want to really get out there more and be more in front of people. And then we're reviewing and consolidating the town's social media platforms. And we've been taking steps. I think Council received an email about the River Center platforms that they've been using. And then finally, this is less for council and more for those who are at home. It's great to be able to talk to one another about how the town's doing or not doing. It's great that you're talking to your neighbors about us, but if there's a problem, call us, talk to us. We can't do a better job if you don't talk to us. And that's all I'm asking council, is that if you're at home and you have a concern, you have a complaint, or you know what, you just want to say a nice thing about the fact that it's easy to pay your sewer bill, let us know directly. And here's all the different ways that you can contact us. Environmental development. So we saw an increase to funding to Fundy Regional Service Commission of $108,000. What was the net new spend on that, James? I've forgotten offhand.
On
The 108 increase to Fundy Regional Service Commission, because we're already paying to Envision and the Regional Facilities Commission.
this
is the net new spend.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's what I thought, I wasn't sure. So this is all new money that's going to Fundy Regional Service Commission. It doesn't include the $64,000 that we're supposed to send to Envision St. John, or the $30,000+ to the Regional Facilities Commission. This is new money.
Does that include the $36,000 from the grant for the region?
This is what we have to tax our residents for. This is not, it would have been $144,000 if the province hadn't chipped in $36,000. So that's new money. $7,000 increase to Envision St. John. Again, that was part of the original deal that the council today signed. I think it was in 2020, Councillor Bailman's, I don't recall offhand.
Okay.
And then, as I alluded to earlier, we did start, spending on the municipal plan and zoning bylaw in the fall of 2022. And so that increase is going here as well. The fire department, council, I'm very pleased to say that this is the best fire department I've been the CAO aware of. We have a phenomenal group of people. We have excellent officers, and our full-time officer corps, the captain of training, our deputy chief, and our fire chief are just first rate. And even then, we did a fire service review, and that'll be public on February 21st. So if you want to know how that turns out, tune in then. And but anyways, there was a gap, and we asked that we have a formal level of service. And that's very important to control costs. If council doesn't understand what they want for level of service from the fire department, then you can get, we don't have that chief, which makes this chief good in our department. But then you can have a chief saying, oh, what about the children? We got to do this, that, and the other. And council dips into everybody's pocket and puts out money this way with a defined level of service. No, this is what we're spending because this is what we expect. And they'll be speaking about that on the 21st. We're hoping, along with the other proud parents that we call our firefighters and officers in chief, for the delivery of a new engine in November, December, but we won't be surprised if it's in 24. We purchased new bunker gear. We've invested to enhance firefighter wellness. And then as well, the chief is working with his colleagues to enhance regional collaboration in the mutual aid system. Recreation, this is the highest profile one and the one that everybody's most keen on. So again, the Parks and Rec Master Plan, I think we approved it in 22, and it's a 10-year plan, so you'll be getting highlights of this past this council's term. We hope to be investing in capital infrastructure projects, and then we're also partnering with community groups and promotions. Very pleased with the Community Vitality Committee, who's has an annual event, almost a calendar now, and I think we're at 8 or 9 events. Is 8 or 9, do you recall? Not to put you on the spot,
Yeah.
Counselor, but.
There's pretty much something almost every month,
Almost,
maybe
yeah.
9.
Yeah, and then there's one on Family Day, so just a plug in for Family Day. Our age-friendly committee was certified again, and we're working with them. And then we've been, a lot of the regular users of our various rooms in this facility have all pretty much moved over to the River Center now. So that facility is being used quite a bit more. And then also through the expansion of our Works Department staff, which I'll talk to about next, we want to do more in-house maintenance and care. As I said earlier, we're going to be incorporating ice and snow control and that means extra staff, and they'll be doing more parks maintenance as well. And so that kicks off this November. Everybody's very, I'm going to say nervous, but also excited about the prospect of doing this. And so, yeah, and there's the snow control number. That number will stay with the town. And again, next year, we'll have a crew that's learning it. Just ask for everybody's patience and support. Are there any questions on this part before we move to James's part? Okay, we were going to schedule budget breaks sponsored by the letter B, but we're going to postpone this sponsorship opportunity for the letter B and go directly to the proposed budget. So here's James.
Thank you, John. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just walk you through the process that we followed to compile the budget, pull the numbers together, and then go through at a high level the budget numbers, the revenues, the expenditures, and then how the tax rates for Ward 1 and Ward 2 were determined. So the process of building the budget, it was a long process. I think I started here at the start of May, had about a month to just get to know everyone and find my way around, and then we started the budget. So this budget was a big part of last year. We started meeting with department heads the start of July. We went through line by line with each of them on the expenditures they could foresee for the year. We challenged them. Did they need those dollars in their budget? We worked together to find ways to make the dollars work. Then in August, administration and council, we spent a day sitting down, going through the strategic plan, reviewing it, amending it. It was really good discussions on that day. We had some submissions from community groups such as the River Valley Community Centre and the Westfield and District Recreation Association. They talked to us about funding that they would need to run programs for the year. We had a lot of administration deliberations sitting around the big screen, figuring the puzzle out. How do we make this all fit together? There were council deliberations. Council made some tough decisions where they wanted to see the money go. Because remember, the money, the budget is the manifestation of the strategic plan. So how do we fulfill the strategic plan with the finite resources that we have? We had a public presentation in early November, and then November 14th, Council recommended the budget for ministerial approval, and in early December it was approved by the Minister. At that point, we had a budget for 2023. So usually when you look at a budget, you start with revenue. What money do we have coming in? So most of the funds, there's about 92% comes from taxation. So we saw a small increase in that for 2023. All the other buckets of revenue pale in comparison to taxation. So we have our community funding that we talked about earlier. We have a surplus from 2021 that comes forward into 2023. There's other revenue and sales services, that is dog tags, building permits, any other miscellaneous items that we have, rental of facilities such as the River Centre. But as you can see from the graph, that makes up a very small portion of the budget. And then we have expenditures. So expenditures, there's two main factors that affect them. And when we put the 2023 budget together, we noticed that there were a lot that were out of our control. So we have things that are inside our control, such as operational savings. So how do we get a better deal on the photocopier, which is something that we did. It was a small saving, but we saved about $7,000-8,000, okay? We can direct that money elsewhere. And then there's things that are outside of our control. Inflation, increased regional costs, and planning for snow control, which we'll get to a little bit later. That's a big ticket item to 2023. Just one thing that we wanted to bring to Council's attention is development incentives, because this is an item that is somewhat in the town's control. So development incentives are something that for many years the town has offered to property developers or people building a house, that if you add $500,000 of value to a property, you're entitled to a rebate for 5 years on a portion of the tax you would pay on that property. This is not an expense that the town can afford much longer. In the current market conditions, this is something that you'll see it's going to increase dramatically over the coming years. So administration is going to be bringing forward a bylaw in 2023 with some recommended changes to that plan. We'll give notice to developers so that they can plan accordingly, but there will be a bylaw coming before you in the next little bit, talking about development incentives and changes to that program. If we look at a comparison of expenditures for 2022 to 2023, you'll see that a lot of the different categories have increases. A lot of that is mainly due to inflationary pressures. Transportation, you'll see, is the biggest item in the budget, and that does have quite a dramatic increase. There are increased costs that we have to incur in 2023 to make sure we're ready to start clearing the snow when it starts falling in November. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next couple of slides, but that's a big chunk of the increased expenditures. So if we look at those categories just in a different way, so here's the increases in dollars, and then were those increases inside our control or outside of our control? So almost all of them are outside of our control, either due to increase in fuel or inflation or increased regional costs. If we look at transportation there, you'll see a $184,000 increase. So we had to double our fuel budget. We have to hire additional staff so that we're ready to start plowing in the fall. These things all add up. And then, again, just a different representation of that. These are the places that the money is spent during the year. So 25% is spent on transportation. You'll see fiscal is 16%. That's a combination of spending on capital items, plus servicing loans and interest. General government, policing, fire, all sort of equal percentages spent on those. So now if we talk a little bit more about the capital plan for 2023. So in summary, the 2023 capital plan is about snow control. 56% of the $2.5 million budget has been allocated to acquiring the necessary equipment for snow control. $300,000 is allocated to a new trackless machine. It's also called a municipal tractor. That can be utilised in the winter and summer months as well. And the remaining funds have been spread around the fire, recreation and general government departments. So in the fire department, there's some funds allocated for the new tanker that the CAO alluded to earlier. There's been some supply chain issues there, and there's some additional money that we need to allocate when that arrives. The fire department is going to repurpose the existing pumper into a rescue, so we have a small amount of money allocated for that. And then up at the Four Corners in Ward 2, there's money put aside for a water tank. That is a fair distance from the current water sources that the fire department has. So they've identified for a number of years now that a water tank in that area could really be beneficial for residents. So we're hoping that that's something that can get done in 2023. So transportation equipment, we're estimating up to $1.4 million for that. We are looking at used equipment, and the advantage of the used equipment is we're hoping to acquire different ages of equipment. So if we were to purchase everything brand new, the price tag would be drastically higher than 1.4 million, and then things would start to need to be replaced all at the same time, which gets costly. And what we found with the pandemic was supply constraints. Sometimes it can be hard to source equipment in a short time frame. So having a fleet of equipment that's some is 2 years old, some of it's 3 years old, some of it's 4 years, 5 years, then as that comes up for replacement over time, it's easier to build into our asset management plan.
Sorry, James. Just want to remind council, the reason that we're bringing snow control in-house in our residents is when we went to tender, the annual cost for snow control is going to be $1.1 million, up from about just over $600,000 per year this year. The council recalls before we went to market, we reviewed it, how much would it cost for us to do it ourselves, and it was going to be around just over $800,000. And so the determination was made to bring it in-house for savings of $300,000. It's a net increase of $200,000, but overall it's a savings of $300,000. So just as a reminder to people, because the decision was made last May, June, we made the decision to start doing this. So I just wanted to remind everybody, even though that number is big, it could have been a lot larger if we had contracted it like we've done for the last number of years.
And we get a value add with that as well. We get control over level of service. We get trained professional staff. We'll have assets. We'll be able to do things with Parks and Rec in the summer as well. So it's not just the money that we're saving, it's an increase in level of service across the town as well.
Thank you for bringing that up, John. And I know the Works Department's really excited to have this equipment, and about the other services they're going to be able to perform in the summer months, because there's a lot of things they look at and they hire contractors to do that now they're going to be able to do themselves. So I know the guys in the Works Department are really excited. And that's what a trackless looks like, or a municipal tractor as it's called. So it's kind of a generic unit, and then attachments can be applied to it. So we currently have two of these units. One is 10 years old and one is coming up to 10 years old. So this is part of our fleet replacement program, and some of the attachments that you can attach can be used for asphalt milling, snow blowing, sweeping. There's a long list of attachments. Mowers can be put on these, so they're really useful, multifunctional. They don't sit idle for very long. I know if you drive through town, you'll quite often see one of the guys whizzing along, clearing the sidewalk with it. They're really, really great little machines. So that's something that hopefully we can have delivered in 2023, ready for the fall. The street improvement program is going to continue. So the Works Commissioner, in association with his engineers, have identified some roads that need resurfacing in 2023. So there's a list, and then the designated highway program is going to continue. with the curbing and guttering that they're doing up just past the golf course. And then there's some money allocated for outdoor recreation infrastructure and community development projects. So these projects are still in their infancy in planning, and when we have more information, will we bring those forward to council. So if we look at investment by department, so I wasn't joking when I said it's dominated by snow control. Just over $2 million is allocated towards transportation. That is money well spent. The residents are going to see value for money on that $2 million over the coming years. Where will we find the money for this $2.5 million that we need to spend? Well, if we work backwards from the bottom, we have about $850,000 from our operating budget. We're going to dip into the capital reserves a little bit. The last council meeting, council approved the application for some borrowings from the province through debentures for $600,000, and then CCBF, which is the Canada Community Building Fund, which a lot of people will recall as the gas tax fund, but gas is a bad word now, so it's the CCBF. So, that's a lot of talking. Let's summarize it and look at some numbers. What does that mean? So, this is an example based on 2022 of how a tax rate gets built. Prior to local governance reform, it was a relatively simple calculation. Lots of work goes into coming up with those numbers, but once you have those numbers, it's quite a simple calculation. We look at what money do we need to run the town's operations for the year, divide by the tax base, and it gives the tax rate. So that's what that calculation represents. In 2022, it was $1.37. Now we have 2 wards. So things get a little bit more complicated because the services that residents receive in Ward 2 are different than the services that residents receive in Ward 1. So the tax rate has to be calculated different for each ward. So what was a simple calculation now has become a little bit more complex. So the province put out guidelines for us to follow when we put together the 2023 tax rate. So basically, the costs were split into 2 buckets. The costs that were shared amongst Ward 1 and Ward 2. For example, the services of the CAO is shared by both wards. So that gets split across both wards. Services that are just delivered and received in one ward apply directly to that ward's tax rate. So, for example, transportation in Ward 1, where the town is responsible for ploughing the roads in Ward 1. It's not responsible for ploughing the roads in Ward 2. The province performs that service through DTI, so our cost for transportation cannot be applied to the Ward 2 tax rate. Garbage collection happens in Ward 2. It doesn't happen in Ward 1. So again, the costs for garbage collection apply to the residents of Ward 2. They don't apply to the residents of Ward 1. So they came up with this concept of shared costs and direct costs that relate to each ward. And then there was also a guideline that the tax rate for Ward 2 could not increase by more than 5 cents. So once we've done all the calculations and crunched all the numbers, could not increase by more than 5 cents. Apart from some legislative and regional service commission costs that could be applied to both wards. So, and those rates worked out at 0.013 for legislative and 0.0487 for the Fundy Regional Service Commission. So those costs were paid for by residents of Ward 1 and Ward 2, and they were applied on top of the 5 cent increase. So what did this look like, or what sort of process did we follow once we gathered all these numbers together? And I just need to exit out of this presentation for a second to find this. So we were provided a template from the province, and this template was provided to all municipalities going through local governance reform process. And what the template did was it helped us allocate the shared costs and then the local, the direct costs between Ward 1 and Ward 2. So it helped us organise them. It's categories for all the different items. So the revenues got divided up, the expenses got divided up, were they shared, were they direct, and then they were summarised on a sheet to help us work out what that tax rate would be. So it was a really robust process that we went through, and it was a consistent process that Bay-Westfield followed, Hampton followed, other municipalities compiling their budgets went through the same process. We'll find our way back into our
Sort of
presentation.
getting back, James, I'd just like council and all residents to know that when you looked at the spreadsheet, when we went through it with a transition facilitator, and then quite often we had, I've lost track of the number of meetings that we had with Fredericton, ensuring that we were compliant with the guidelines that they had published, and that the numbers were there where they're supposed to be. So at the end of the day, we were compliant. Like I said earlier, we were one of the first municipalities that had been amalgamated or had done annexation to have their budgets approved. So we went through, it's very robust, James is very good. If we weren't sure, we put in the phone calls or the emails or something like that. At the end of the day, our job is to be compliant with the guidelines and regulations as established by the province.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. So once we put all the numbers into the spreadsheet, we could then see some breakouts by ward. So this is, if we, can I go back? There was a really simple calculation we did. There's a handful of numbers on the page there. And then the process for 2023, the calculation was a little bit more complex, a few more numbers involved, but the same sort of concept. So in Ward 1, what was the cost to deliver the services to residents in Ward 1 divided by the assessment base of Ward 1. And that gave us a tax rate of $1.3529. In Ward 2, what was the cost of the services that the residents of Ward 2 receive divided by the tax base, gave us a non-residential rate of 0.6024. And then you'll notice that the non-residential rate is 1.7 times that rate. That was a change in the regulation through local governance reform that came from Fredericton. Previously that was 1.5, but the change was that councils were allowed to change that number between 1.4 to 1.7, and council approved a 1.7 ratio.
Sorry, I just want to bring to council's attention and residents as well. Even though the commercial rate went from 1.5 to 1.7, there's a net decrease to our non-residential properties this year because the province, in their words, vacated the tax room, which means that they were no longer collecting property tax there. So even though we maximized what we could collect, the tax rate still in effect went, or the amount of tax paid by non-commercial or non-residential properties went down.
Yeah, I believe they decreased it by 15%.
Yeah.
Was the rate. So, any questions on that?
No, but I just want to thank you for making that distinction between tax rate and overall tax burden, because often they're very different things.
Yes.
You know, we're often compared to different municipalities in terms of what our actual mill rate is, when in actuality, we pay less taxes than other municipalities because our assessment base is lower, and so your overall tax burden is less.
So then if we look at that in comparison to 2022, so the tax base increased by 10%. Expenditures increased by just under 9%. There was a small decrease in non-tax revenue of 6%. The community grant funding decreased by just under 5%, and our warrant that was raised increased by just under 11%. So there was a decrease in the tax rate for Ward 1 by just under 1.5%, and then an increase of just over 22% for Ward 2. So what does that look like for a homeowner? So if we take the first line there, and I think, Your Worship, that might be your residence.
I recognize those numbers.
So your property increased in value about just under $16,000. And the tax rate went from $1.37 in 2022 to just over $1.35 in 2023. So there is an increase. Even though the tax rate went down, the tax bill went up a little bit because of the increase in assessment value. So there's an annual increase there of $188, which works out to be a monthly increase of about $15. However, we did some analysis and looked at, what if the tax rate had stayed at $1.37? And if it had stayed at $1.37, you would have paid almost $27 extra in tax. So that small decrease, it helped. It saved a little bit on everyone's properties in Ward 1. And if we look at somebody's residence in Ward 2, so we have a property, the first line there, $132,000 in 2022. The assessment did not change, so there was no increase in assessed value. So you'll see the effect that has, because the tax rate went from 49 cents up to 60 cents, and that caused a $148 increase in taxes. It works out about $12 a month. And then similar for the second property, there was no change in the assessed value. So the tax rate increase caused about a $19 a month increase. Just of note that the residents in Ward 2 also pay a provincial tax. As mentioned earlier, the province does maintain the roads. Fortunately, they don't do that for free. It's just over 40 cents that the residents in Ward 2 pay to the province for the services they receive directly from the province. So once we had gone through the process, submitted the budget to the province, we did receive ministerial approval in early December on Ward 1 and Ward 2's budget. So are there any further questions? Okay, just to bring this slide came up earlier, we talked about communications. These are all the ways that residents can contact the town. We have social media feeds, you can watch meetings on YouTube, we have phone line, email, you can send us a letter if you wish. We'd love to hear from residents, so if you have any feedback or questions on tonight's presentation, please do reach out to us.
Thank you, James. That was great. And I would encourage anybody that's watching that has questions to contact the town directly. John or James can answer your questions if you have them, and like I said, and John said earlier, it's great to talk to each other about it, but to really get the answers that you need, call the town. Thank you.
Any questions from council, your worship?
Yeah, your question. Well, why does tax base didn't rise in Ward 2? Why didn't assessment go up? Like Stack's saying.
Yeah, that's a process administered by Service New Brunswick. We've reached out to Service New Brunswick to gain an insight into their process.
It's not fair for the Ward 2 and our own Ward 1 is that we'd be punished for some reason. I don't know. I think, why did they go up?
So I have been talking with the assessment agency, and even going back to the previous council, one of the recommendations that we put forward is that there be municipal oversight of the assessment agency. We are, I would argue, the biggest clients the assessment agency has, municipalities. We place greater value on property values than the province may. And yet we have no oversight, there's no accountability. This is something that I agree with you, Councillor, that definitely has to change. We have sent in, properties that we don't understand what happened. How is it that property values haven't changed in 10 years when the property next door sold for 3 or 4 times as much as the house next door? When you look at it, it's difficult to discern the difference. So I very much share your concern. I have been talking with the assessment agency since last fall, I think, and I'm expecting some answers here, but I don't know. And I want to assure council, though this isn't reassuring, my colleagues share the same concerns. In fact, it came up at our regional meeting last Friday, and it'll be a source of discussion going forward, but I do again think that something has to be done. This is the system. It shouldn't be a black box. Of all the financial transactions that go on in the municipality and the province, the assessment agency should be the most transparent, even if the formula is 4 pages long. Sorry, I'm starting to rant. I should be quiet.
No, I agree, and it is a little shocking when you compared, the Ward 1, examples that you used, James, and they're all going up. And you look at Ward 2, and they've remained static.
Yeah, because they knew the reform's going. They had a year already or more. They knew this was going to come. Why did they just put stale on that side of it? That doesn't make sense to me either. So I don't know. It hurts people in Bay-Westfield, like the Ward 1 and Ward 2 is has a, I don't know. It just doesn't sound right. That's all.
No, I don't think anybody will disagree with you here,
No,
Councillor.
But I don't think it's all other homes. For example, my assessment value has increased, but I don't think it was consistent. I don't think it was everybody. But there were some that had increased and some that didn't.
Yeah, we identified a couple of blocks where the whole thing didn't change.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, this gets back to a question of fairness. And, I don't want to use the word equality, but just a fairness. You go to other jurisdictions, and there has to be a market adjustment minimum every 3 years. And we've identified properties where it's been greater than 10 years. And I'm not faulting the property owners. I want to be clear, it's not their fault. We have a vendor who isn't communicating and isn't as transparent as perhaps they should be.
So if a house sold next to you went down, like I said, went from $300,000 went down to $100,000, would that affect on tax rate?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So if somebody moves from another province, comes here, and they're paying an enormous amount of money for a house they don't even know about, that hurts everybody in that little vicinity of their house.
Absolutely.
Because somebody overpays for it, then they're all being punished. So I don't know how the province.
Well, Councillor, I think we have to be careful about how we use the word punish.
Well, it feels like
because if a person next door has their house purchased for 3 times as much, and I'm pretty sure that they'll be pretty happy if they could sell their house for 3 times as much. It's only punished because I'm being taxed for what it's worth. I don't see how that's punishment. you know, if somebody's willing to say, yeah, I'll sell my house for that much, or, you know, if your house is undervalued at $100,000, will you sell it to me for that at the assessed value?
We're comparing from other people out of town, like Toronto and Vancouver, coming down, house on scene, buying houses for $100,000 house for $400,000. They just buy them, and that really affects the person next door to you. I don't know what you mean by that, but it affects everybody in that area.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not disagreeing with you. I don't know that it's punished though.
Well, let's say if somebody can afford to have a house, $1 million house in Toronto or Vancouver, and sell a house for $500,000, $600,000, like, wow, that's a steal, I got money left over after I move here. I think it's punishing people.
But you know, I think that's also an indicator of some larger factors in which you look at the Ecole Lycée that's coming on next year. We're looking at about 100 employees. You're looking at Port St. John, the expansion there, MB Southern, the expansion there. You look at the Integrated Health Initiative, and I think we're looking at hundreds of staff there. At the end of the day, we don't have enough housing in this region for growth, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to be very unfortunate for some people. You know, and we need to change our mindset where we're playing defense against out migration and playing offense. How do we plan and how do we manage growth? And it's challenging. I lived through that in Saskatchewan. And I don't know that there's any right answers, but there's a lot of wrong ways to do things.
But I think it's for lack of housing, period, around the whole province. They're buying houses, there were no houses for sale on the market, it's sold next day almost. So it was lack of houses, and it was a field day for people who want to sell their houses.
I think we're getting a little out of scope here.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
but yeah, I take your point, Councillor, absolutely. Do we have any other questions for either James or John on the presentation?
Just a comment, Your Worship. This is the second budget presentation that we've had the pleasure of seeing for this fiscal year. It gets better each time. To state very politely, it's very clear. There aren't any accounting terms that are slipped in that people don't understand. It was very methodical, and please keep up the good work.
Yes, I agreed. Thank you for saying that, Councillor Malcolm. I completely agree. You know, the presentations are great. You know, people that don't have accounting backgrounds can easily understand that. And I think that's part of, you know, one of our values of communication and transparency. And it speaks to the talent of both of you to communicate that in a way that people really do understand. So thank you both for that, and thank the rest of the staff that aren't here tonight as well, because I know a lot of work was into this.
Yeah, all that work was done in October.
But you know, I still learn something every time I'm taking notes and everything. I'm like, well, that was the number. So you know, it's always good to hear it multiple times. So if we don't have any other questions for staff, the motion on the table is that the Council of the Town of Bay-Westfield receive and file the information as presented. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Thank you, Councillor Bellmans. Do I have a second? Thank you, Councillor Burpee. Any questions or comments on the motion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded? Motion is carried. Thank you, Council. We'll move on to item 8, adjournment. The motion is that the Council of the Town of Grand Bay-Westfield adjourn the meeting at 8:18 p.m. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Councillor McIntosh Lawrence. And do I have a second? Councillor Bellmans, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded? Motion is carried. Thank you very much, Council. And just a reminder to everybody watching, please call the town if you have any questions.